Karen, do you have a sense of how this proposed ordinance would affect the golf course in Avila?
Good question. Some of these facilities have maybe grandfathering or historic rights, so we really will have to look at case by case and possibly draft something to the ordinance that says if you've, have a historic use, you'll continue to get something. That's what my take.
So
but again,
there's
a decision.
Some sites that will continue to operate as is.
Yeah, if say you got an event permit 2 weeks ago and are operating, you can continue to operate. You will be legal non-conforming, basically, if the rules change.
Did you want to jump in real quick, Danielle? 1 minute, please.
Yeah, this again is one of these things, like, it's really weird when you look at these categories. Here we have these historic gems, like the Octagon Barn and the Lighthouse and the Estancia, and they're on ag land. And here they are, they're historic, they're vulnerable, they're gems, but somehow we can allow them to be subject to this terrible use that events put on your land. But if you have a new barn that isn't falling down, that doesn't really, then you can't do that.
It's been restored.
And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in the sense of it doesn't hang together logically. It makes sense only if you understand that whole issue of the ruse of trying to say you're streamlining and facilitating when you're really not. Then it makes sense.
Danielle, let Kim jump in there because this is directed in her way, and the basic question is why exempt historic places like the Octagon Barn, the Lighthouse, both of which happen to be my district and are wonderful. Why exempt them if events are and they are historic and they are ones that have been restored over time? Why is it that they should somehow be exempt from the impacts of events, whereas other places are not?
What you have to do is answer the question in the inverse, which is, I don't think that what is being suggested is that we shouldn't allow nonprofit events or that we shouldn't allow ag historic structures to get some additional consideration. And that's what following this suggestion to its logical conclusion would drive you to say, well, we aren't going to allow ag events, or we aren't going to allow ag historic structures this special consideration, and we aren't going to allow nonprofit events. We decided as a community that those are important to us, and that was built into the drafting of the ordinance, and the Planning Commission agreed.
Okay, let me let Karen jump in, please.
I just want to give a little history of how this came about. When the Planning Commission was going in the direction of eliminating the possibility of doing weddings and special events in agriculture, this came out as an unintended consequence. Some folks from the Lighthouse said, hey, what about us? And then that is when the Planning Commission came up with the idea of protecting the historic sites and adding that to the draft.
But the question, I think, still goes, I'm taking the option as moderator here, which is why don't the impacts that events cause, which is what's being asked, apply to, I mean, we obviously have great interest in wanting to preserve our historic sites, so why wouldn't that seem to apply to those places that are rather unique and significant, as opposed to just somebody who has land? Okay.
The impacts are the same. That is true. The impacts of an event, whether it's held by a nonprofit organization for the benefit of the community, are the same. What the ordinance does is it allows them in a few select circumstances.
Okay. This one's for Jackie. What effect will opening up ag land to events have on Williamson Act contracts?
My understanding, and Karen, you might help me on this, but we were to finish up the events and then go look at events on the Williamson Act, and so that has another step to go through. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They we're re-looking at the allowed uses in Williamson Act and tabled the issues that were going to be tackled by ag tourism, like bed and breakfasts and roadside stands and events being one of them.
Okay. Here's a question for the entire panel. Are any of you on the panel currently in an ag enterprise, or have you ever been? We'll leave Karen out of it and go down the panel. Ag enterprise.
I'm assuming in ag production. I have not, my father has, and I've helped him with almonds in the valley.
Okay.
I'm a new farmer. I just planted 100 olive trees, but my family, one of the Lincoln Douglas debates was held on my family's farm in Illinois. I come from multiple generations of farmers, and my father had a nut operation in the San Fernando Valley.
My property isn't zoned ag, but the first year I was there, I made $13 selling an entire 5-gallon bucket of cherries, and I was really excited about it. But that's as close as it gets. However, my husband, since we got married in '06, has planted a small vineyard and has become just a little winemaker, and I don't drink wine, but I understand that it's really good wine. So we are now, a small vineyard, but we're not actually ag zoned.
Okay. Here's a question on from vineyard and winery world. Those in the vineyard and winery world are very concerned that this will ultimately lead to restrictions on their businesses as well. Can you assure them that it will not, or will it? So this is a concern that continues to be out there, and some of it hasn't been totally clear.